Hi, Deanne and Erica, John. Wow, a lot of people joining now. Great. Pamela, Fatima, thank you for joining us, everyone, today. Um, for the lunch hour, I hope you're having a great day, and we will get started in just a minute or so once people start. All right. People are still coming in. Thank you for joining us. All right. Well, again, hello. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Sachka Oates, and I work as a technical assistance consultant for the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, and I coordinate regional training as well as this research forum webinars for CalPro. And we also have Josie Cleveland from AIR and CalPro here providing technical support. And today's webinar topic is media literacy for adult learners, enhancing critical thinking skills in the digital age. It's an important topic in today's world, I believe. And we are joined by our presenter, Ilse Pollitt. Ilse is an independent consultant working on projects in adult education, and she supported the development of CalPro's community of practice on civic engagement through democratic literacy, the training this webinar is based on. And she previously served as the director of South Bay Consortium for Adult Education. So thank you again for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to pass it over to Josie for quick housekeeping.
Thank you all for being here today. Like Satiko said, I am Josie Cleveland. I'm here to help with any technical assistance that you might need today. So if you have any troubles with Zoom or any other tech issue related to CalPro, I'd be happy to help. You can email me at jcleveland@air.org, or you can give us a call at the number you see on the screen. Today, feel free to use the chat at any point to ask questions, to give comments or input. And so that is totally available for you to use in today's webinar. We will also have a poll in today's webinar, so be on the lookout for a pop-up when we get to that on your screen. And if you can't, for some reason, use the poll, feel free to just type your answer into the chat here, and that will work as well. Feel free to use any of your reactions that you see in your Zoom bar. We would love to see those if you feel so inclined. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and this is just a notice letting you know of that. And we do not allow any kind of external AI generated items. And so I wanted to bring attention to that today as well. That is all I have. So I'm going to pass it back over to Sachiko.
All right, thank you, Josie. Let me share my screen real quick. You see it now, I hope. All right. Well, great to see some familiar faces here. Before we get started, we have a handout for today's webinar, and later we will use it. So Josie, if you can post the handout to the chat, you can download it now, so it's all ready to go when we do that activity. Anyways, I wanted to get us started by asking you about you and your program. Again, today's topic is media literacy, and just curious how you are currently incorporating media literacy into your instruction. If you can share any successes or challenges, please put in the chat. And also, what brought you here today? What do you hope to gain through today's webinar? We will try to incorporate as many points, or try to address your goals as much as possible. So if you could type in the chat how are you addressing media literacy currently in your instruction, and what do you hope to gain from today's webinar?
Do you want it solely in the chat, or can we just say it out loud?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just because I'm like, I think I could speak faster than I type. Hello everybody. I would say currently we don't actually have too much. I would say that it's literacy that would be incorporated under media literacy, except for potentially our English Learners Book Club. Just because with the stories that we read, I'm the one that leads that. But I usually try to actually have my learners look at why the book was written, like what is the message trying to be, what are the themes that might connect to nowadays. So just looking a little bit under the surface rather than just reading, it's actually paying attention to the text. That's been going pretty slow because I've had to incorporate that slightly newishly, and so they're getting the hang of it. And today really is, I just want to learn a lot more about how we can incorporate media literacy into any of our other existing programs or to create something new.
Thank you so much. It sounds like you're embedding critical thinking skills and media literacy into your existing courses. That's great. And I see a couple of responses in the chat. John says, I don't currently have any media literacy, but definitely looking for more ways to connect them to offer more skills. Excellent. Today, we're going to get into why it's important for adult learners and all that. And Deanne says, use Chromebooks and videos, research. All these are, yeah, those assignments require media literacy skills. So great. Keep your chat coming on. I will continue monitoring, but we're going to move on to talk about what we kind of thought about as our goals. So webinar objectives include we're going to discuss the impact of media on society a little bit and define what media literacy is and describe the importance of media literacy in adult education. And finally, hopefully you will gain some practical tools and strategies to help learners critically evaluate media sources and, help them navigate the digital landscape in today's world. So we are doing the introduction now, and we're going to get into what is media literacy and why it's important. And then how can we help develop media literacy? And we're going to go over critical thinking skills. And also there is a framework developed by the National Association for Media Literacy Education. So we're going to get into that. And the handout actually has the framework. And then we are going to talk about integrating media literacy in the classroom. And we'll end with some discussion and reflection. All right. Are we ready to get started? Now, without any further ado, I'll hand it over to today's presenter, Ilsa.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Ilse, and as Sashiko said, I'm an independent consultant, and among other projects, I'm working with CALPRO as a facilitator and also as a content reviewer and developer. So it's a pleasure to be with you today and spend our lunch hour talking about media literacy and how to incorporate it into our adult education classrooms. So we're going to start with talking about what media literacy is and why it's important. And then in the second part of the webinar, we're going to look at some strategies on how to incorporate media literacy into your classrooms for your learners. Before we get started, though, we would like to take a quick poll, and we can go to the next slide. Let's see. So media has always sought to shape public opinion, and you're obviously familiar with traditional media such as print and magazines or newspapers and books, TV and radio broadcasts, outdoor media with advertisements, buildings and billboards. But things have changed, and now we have many more types of media. So we're just going to get a little bit of inventory of what media do you use to get information, news, or entertainment? And then also, if you scroll down on the poll, you will see that same question for your students. So what do you use? What do your students use in terms of media sources? We'll give you a minute to complete that poll, and then we'll look at the results together. So if you're filling out the poll, be sure to scroll down so you can see both questions. Okay, let's take a look at the responses together. So Josie, if you wouldn't mind closing the poll and sharing the results with us. So we see for personal use of media, a lot of websites, a lot of different social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and what have you, mobile apps, a little bit of video gaming, podcasts, blogs, ebooks, only 13%, forums, digital ads, okay, and 19% generative AI. Okay, now let's take a look at our students. Pretty higher, I think, in terms of social media platforms, and a little lower in terms of websites, more mobile apps, similar responses, I believe, for video gaming, podcast, blogs, and no percentage for 0% for generative AI. So that's interesting. It looks like we are maybe a little getting our feet wet with AI, but we're not sure if our students are using it or familiar with it. So that's an interesting takeaway. All right, thank you so much. So now that's, you can stop sharing those results. So let's take a look at how much time we're spending on internet and social media usage. So these are this is data from a July 2023 report, which says that on average, people use the internet for 6 hours and 40 minutes a day. And of that time, the daily average spent on social media is about 2 hours and 26 minutes. Now that that's 2 years ago, so maybe that has increased by now in 2025. Maybe those numbers seem a little conservative. What is certain is that we spend a lot of time on social media and on internet. And with these new technologies, anyone can create content. So this requires consumers of that information to be able to critically evaluate what's on the internet and what's on social media and check the sources. So let's take some time to think about what media literacy is. And let's brainstorm together first. Just thinking about this term media literacy, what does that mean to you? What comes to mind when you hear that term? And what skills do you think we need to critically engage with media content? And what skills do your students need to engage with media content? So you can take a minute to think about these questions. You can post your responses in the chat, and I'll take a look at what is showing up there. So what is media literacy and what skills are needed to engage with media content? If you prefer to unmute and share your thoughts, that's fine too. Yes, Christy, absolutely. The reliability of a source, knowing where something is coming from, very important, checking the source. Oh, you're not allowed to unmute, I'm sorry.
Anyone should be able to unmute now.
Thank you. I think it's the ability to decipher information. Just like literacy with a book, it would be applicable to any sort of computer program or anything online.
Yeah, absolutely. Deciphering,
Yeah.
decoding information for sure. Thank you.
I'll sort of piggyback off that, but like, yeah, it really is understanding the message of whatever the text you're trying to consume is. Well, not just text, but overall, any sort of media piece, honestly. Being able to hopefully infer information that isn't there, being able to understand if there's biases being put into it, all that kind of stuff goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of reading between the lines and behind the lines, like not just what is literally written there, what is the content, but also where is it coming from, what's the intent, as John says in the chat, what are the main ports and supporting ideas. All very good observations. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Considering the author or creator's purpose, checking their background. Yes, absolutely. Again, where is this information coming from? That's a great place to start. So when we look at a definition of media literacy, it encompasses different components. So it starts with knowing how to find and engage with media content. It also includes the ability to analyze and evaluate media, to assess the credibility, as was mentioned in the chat, of what it says, to determine whether it's truthful, whether it's a fact, if it's believable, and also evaluating the intentions and the potential impact of the media. It's important to question those messages. Are they intentional, unintentional, that are contained in posts, to understand the techniques used to share the content, creators' intentional and unintentional messages as well. And then finally, media literacy includes the ability to understand and apply these skills so that you can understand how media affects public opinion, culture, and policy. And part of that is creating content responsibly and ethically, and understanding the intentional and unintentional messages sent by your content. As we mentioned, with social media, anybody can create content, anybody can post something. So we have to think about, when we do that, what are we adding? What are we putting out in the world, and what messages are we sending as well? So why is this important? Why is media literacy important for your students? We certainly live in a complex world right now. So what would you say are the challenges your students face in terms of media literacy? As we described, we thought about our understanding and a definition of media literacy. So we're going to give you a minute to think, and we would like you to, as you're typing in the chat, to hold off on hitting send until we tell you to hit send. So just to give everybody a chance to think without having to digest other people's responses. So we'll just invite you to type your response, and then a minute from now, we'll ask you to hit send. Okay, you can go ahead and hit send now. Let's see. We're going to see a bunch of messages all at the same time. So challenges, yeah, what to believe, who to believe, keeping up with society, not having the skills to analyze the source, fake information, and social media being a major source for many of students. So detecting misinformation is super important. Thank you, John. Authentic information versus fake news, fact from opinion, the source. Yeah, the immediacy of it. Thank you for mentioning that, Claudia. There's not always enough time to understand the information or understand where it's coming from. Access is a challenge, yes, and we can think about language level there as well, as one of the challenges to accessing. Lack of computers for students, yep. As well, computers, and I would add to that access to broadband and data connections. Yeah. Again, distinguishing sources, proper sources from false one, access. AI, yes, thanks Esteban. Differentiating between AI content and human-produced content, tech literacy in general, and trusting information. Excellent. Yes. So no shortage of challenges for our students, and I think no shortage of challenges for us as well, right? So we can share information with our students on how to be critical consumers of the media, but I think it's equally a challenge for us, especially in the times we're living in today. So I think it's honest to share that with our students as well, that it's a challenging environment for all of us, and we don't have all the answers either. Okay, so let's think about some other concerns for our students, our adult learners in particular. They may be good with technology, but they may not have the education or experience to interpret the information they find. And artificial intelligence, as was mentioned in the chat, is certainly making this increasingly challenging. From a fake news study in 2018, fake news, one of the things that you all mentioned in the chat, it really is concerning because the top 1% of false news reach between 1,000 and 100,000 people. In contrast, the true rumors rarely reached more than 1,000 people. So it took the truth about 6 times as long as falsehoods to reach 1,500 people. So it just takes a lot longer for the truth to make it out there, and false rumors seem to be spreading at a much larger scale and a much more rapid pace. So that's definitely a challenge for media users as well. Okay, so we talked about the challenges, we talked about the importance of media literacy, we shared some thoughts about what media literacy is. So let's look at some ways that we can support our students in developing media literacy so that they're prepared for the complex world in which we all live. And let's look at how we can evaluate information in the media. So first of all, critical thinking is always a skill for successfully engaging with the media, and it's more important now than ever. As we discussed, we live in a time where there are unique threats to students' media literacy. So here are some qualities of critical thinkers. They ask questions, they ask relevant, pertinent questions. They have a sense of curiosity. They're interested in finding new solutions. They examine beliefs, assumptions, and opinions and weigh them against facts. They listen carefully to others. They look for evidence to support assumptions and beliefs. They adjust opinions when new facts are found, and they examine problems closely. So as you look at this list, are there any bullet points that stand out to you as critically important, or are there things that maybe you think are missing? Are there other qualities of critical thinkers that you think should be added? And you can type your responses in the chat. So what stands out to you on this slide, and is there anything missing?
I think the adjusting opinions when new facts are found. We tend to accept information as a given, especially given, whatever background we have, preconceptions of the way the world works. So when we have new information and social or media has information so quickly, it changes so quickly. I think that's hard for people to adjust the way that they think when new facts are found.
Yeah, absolutely. And we seem to be almost guided towards not adjusting our opinions, right? We seem to be put in a position to dig in, right, and entrench ourselves in our opinions. So that ability to be flexible and to adjust opinions is indeed important. And Christy added in the chat that that is also tricky because we have leaders who call real news fake news. So it really is hard to know what is real, what is fake, right? Let's see. Yeah, examining beliefs and assumptions seems very important. and looking for evidence. Yeah, exactly. So those two go together. We're living in echo chambers. Yes. Difficult for students to formulate pertinent questions. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that is a challenge, and again, where the language comes in as well. Language proficiency comes in as well. Yeah, and why does false information travel faster than the truth? That's a good. That's the question, Deanne. Like, why is it? Maybe because it's more polarizing. Because it's more. It speaks to our emotions a bit more. It's more provocative, maybe, that false news than the facts. Yeah, good question. Okay. Yeah, so we definitely want to encourage our students to be critical thinkers. There are ways to do that. We're going to talk about the framework in a little bit, that National Association for Media Literacy framework. But before we do that, how do you think instructors can support the development of those critical literacy skills? And what are some ways that you could embed, or maybe are already embedding, critical thinking skills in your lessons? And again, we'll give you some time to respond in the chat. Yeah, Fatima, for sure. Developing curiosity. So unappreciated, underappreciated. Yes. Encourage questioning, model critical thinking, ask what students think. Yes, I think that modeling is really important as an instructor, and to encourage people to question, right? That may be something that students are not used to or may not always have been allowed to do, to question. So definitely a good place to start. Model searching, info online with Gen AI. Think aloud, show how we check other sources. Great idea. Yeah. Demonstrating modeling, research, and explicit instruction to discern facts from opinion. Yeah, all great ideas. There are some other things that you could do is maybe things like problem-based learning, where you look at, you present a real-world problem to your students, and you find in a group to find solutions that may encourage students to do some research and apply their knowledge and think critically. Things like role-playing, different scenarios, or using different viewpoints. Like you could even assign viewpoints to students and ask them to defend it, even if it's a different viewpoint from their own, but that teaches empathy, that teaches kind of how one topic can be viewed from different angles. You can try to do some fact-checking activities. You can use reading strategies, such as finding evidence for arguments in essays. And then Victor says in the chat also to remind them that people make mistakes and it's okay to double check what people teach. Yeah, again, I think that great idea that goes back to kind of being comfortable with kind of reassessing your position or being flexible about your positions as well. Excellent ideas. So let's take a look at that framework that we mentioned. So this is coming from the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And you also have this as a handout. Josie just put the link in the chat so you can download this for your personal use as well. So this National Association has provided a great resource for analyzing media. And this slide is adapted from what's called their key questions to ask when analyzing media experiences. And we can use this framework with our students to examine any form of media. We'll go through it kind of quickly now, but you have the handout, so you can come back to it and continue to process it after today's session as well. The website from NAMLI also has really good tools So the framework starts by considering who the authors are and who the audiences are. Who created the media, why, who may have financial gains from this media. Also a good question to think about the economics of your media sources. And that was one of the things that many of you mentioned, right? Knowing the source, who made this, why, what is the audience for this? If we could go to the next slide. The framework also provides questions for analyzing the content as well as the communication techniques used. What can we learn from the content? What may be left out? What is obvious? What is implied? And how do the format and communication techniques contribute to the overall message? So that's where we're going to look at how things are shared with the public, what techniques are used for communicating a message as well. And finally, the framework also includes a space for reflections and evaluation of the credibility of the media. What does my interpretation tell me about myself? What is my interpretation of this media? What emotions does this media provoke? How credible is it? How do I know? How do I think I know how credible it is? And we can use this framework as an instructional tool in our classes, or we could use it even a few questions at a time. You'll notice that not all questions may apply to every media experience. There may be others you find yourself asking in addition to these questions. And some questions will have more than one answer. But for all questions, we should probe for evidence and ask ourselves, how do I know that? What makes me say that? So going a little deeper, going a little behind the question that we're asking as well. So to illustrate the use of this framework, I'm just gonna show you real quick how we might apply this framework to a website and see if we can evaluate this website using the framework. So you can use, we're going to look at the League of Women Voters website. You can click on the link in the chat if you want to follow along, and I'll also go ahead and I'll share my screen to demonstrate this to you. Okay. So you should be able to see the League of Women Voters website now. And so again, we're going to apply the NAMLI framework to this website. So one of the first questions we're going to ask ourselves is, who made this and why? And the first clue that we can see is just looking at the URL or the link for this website, we see a .org. So we already know that it's not a for-profit, it's not a commercial website. They're not selling us anything per se. It's also not a government website. So that .org tells us that it's a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization. The homepage already has the information we're looking for. Like if we want to know who this is, who made this, it already says here that the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan grassroots organization, and why they're working to protect and expand voting rights. And then they also tell us how they're doing that through advocacy, education, and litigation, local, state, and national levels. So this is actually a good example. It's pretty easy to find that information on this website, who this is and why they made this. Another clue, or if we want to dig deeper, we could look at the About Us section, which many websites have. So you can look at the history, you can look at staff, partnership, who's the board of directors and the trustees. That can tell you a lot about the people behind this, their credibility, and their reasons for creating this. Many websites will also have a mission statement. Something that can be really interesting too, going back to that first part of the framework, is who made this, who paid for this. So many websites, organizations will have financial reports or annual reports. So if you want to dig deeper in the finances or who is benefiting from this, that would be a good place to kind of check out who is paying for that. One of the other questions of the framework was, what is this source trying to make me do? Is there a call to action? So you already see here that there's these two prominent buttons at the top. You can join the League of Women Voters or you can donate. So it's asking me to engage, it's asking me to do something. I can also here look up maybe my local chapter. They make it really easy to donate with these buttons here at the bottom. And then at the top, if I click on the menu, I can find my elected officials. So there's tools for me to engage in the democratic process here as well. So that's just a snapshot of kind of how you might apply that framework and ask some of those questions and where you might direct your students to look for the information. So again, I think the pointing to the .com, .org, .gov is interesting, gives you relevant information, and then about us sections usually are a good place to start and check the credibility of resources as well. So let me stop sharing and get your thoughts on this activity. This was really quick, so you would take some more time in your classroom. You could, ask your students to try to find answers to those questions. But how did that exercise go? What do you think might be challenging for your students? What might be difficult? And how could you incorporate some of those skills into your lessons? Is that an activity that you see yourself doing with your students? What sites would you use? And the answer is like having the framework to keep the activity focused. Yes, yeah, the framework is a good place to start, like having those questions.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so we look at the website and it has org. And how do we know it is not made up?
That's a good question. So I would say something to look for in ORG, like all nonprofits they have a board. So finding the information about the board members, finding maybe a mission statement or a financial or annual report. I think those are all things that I would be looking for when I look at nonprofit websites. Certainly, if I'm going to donate or financially support an organization, I want to know some credibility of it. There are some websites. I'm trying to think of the website that evaluates nonprofit organizations as well to their credibility. It'll come to me.
Thank you.
Any other reactions to the framework, to the activities? I'll give you some more ideas on how to use this in a minute as well.
Nah, I do think it is I know you mentioned like with the class it'd actually be a bit longer, but even just a starting point, I think is already getting them paying attention a bit more to a web page and what information it might have and what exactly is the web page trying to make you do. So I never stop to think of it myself. I'm like, what's the most prominent things you see on a web page? What exactly are they trying to convey immediately to you? So even just in a regular website rather than like, for example, like a scam website where it's super in your face a lot of the times and they're like last minutes, that's already something. But even a usual web page has something.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's a great place to start, right? And just asking some basic questions can get you, access that information a little bit easier about checking the credibility and the source. So yeah, absolutely. So let me walk you through some other ways on how you might use this. So you could use the framework as a standalone lesson, right? You could go through the questions one by one. You could try to have your students apply it to a source, a website, or another media source and try to answer the questions very much like we demonstrated with the League of Women Voters website. But that's not the only way. You can also consider how to include aspects of media literacy and critical thinking into your existing curriculum. And a good example is if there are pictures, if there's a photo in a textbook that you're using, you could discuss who or what is in the photo, why the photo was included in the book, and how students think the author wants them to feel about it, right? And that goes to like some questions about representation, photos, pictures, often try to elicit emotions in us as we're using resources. So you could apply the framework or parts of the framework to your curriculum. You can also integrate media literacy into assessments or class projects. So for example, instead of assigning an essay, you could have students experiment with new forms or other forms of media. So ask them to write or record a podcast or create an infographic for a final project or assessment. And then you could ask students to use the framework to analyze their own content or analyze the content that their classmates, their peers have created. So you could use it as a tool to kind of analyze, to reflect on their own content creation. Okay. And then finally, we showed you one tool, but we also wanted to share some other useful websites that you can use as teaching resources for media literacy. So PBS has a really good website on news and media literacy. So let's see, there it is. Yeah, so this page has actually a lot of information about fake news, fact checking, how to navigate the web. So these are a really good website to explore if you want to include this into your lesson planning. Then there's also Common Sense Media, which you may be familiar with for their ratings of movies or books and other media, but they have this page for educators specifically. So there's lots of resources around digital citizenship, websites for learning, professional development. So that, and then you have their book and movie reviews as well, which I find just really helpful for myself as well. There's also some resources around ChatGPT, AI literacy lessons. They tend to be focused on K-12, but they may give you some inspiration for things that you can modify and adapt to your adult learner audience. And then finally, we have the News Literacy Project. They organize a Media Literacy Week once a year. So again, a very good resource library with classroom activities, quizzes, resources around news literacy. So I definitely encourage you to check these out and click around. If you find things that are particularly relevant, feel free to reach out to us and share that. It's always good to hear from people who have found good resources and used them in their classrooms. Okay. So with that, we want to open it up to questions. So if there's anything else that's on your mind, or if you want to share a practice or have a question about anything that we have discussed, feel free to post it in the chat or unmute, and we can take a few questions in our Q&A.
I see a question about sharing the resources. We will be following up with an email with all the links we shared today. And then this webinar is recorded, so it will be posted on our website where you can see all the slides again.
Mm-hmm. Good. That sounds like good timing, Deanne. Your next unit is on media bias. Good. I'm glad to hear this is useful. Yes. Yes, and so the slides will be shared afterwards. Mm. Okay, so if there are no burning questions, I'll turn it back over to Sashiko to close us out.
Yeah. Thank you, Ilsa, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I know this is a tricky but very critical and important topic. So, you know, if you have resources to share, please reach out to us, and we will be following up with all the links we shared today. But before we go, we would like to get your feedback on this webinar. It will be very helpful. We will use, you know, your responses to improve future offerings. So please take a couple minutes before you leave to respond to just a few questions on the on this feedback form. You can scan it, scan the QR code, or click on the link Josie just put in the chat. Thank you so much. And then we have we have these webinars probably once a month, more or less. And the next webinar is scheduled for April 8th, and it's about, you know, literacy skills. We did talk about how literacy skills are a critical part of, you know, being able to dig deeper into the information that students see on social media and things like that. So this next webinar will feature literacy, writing and reading in adult education. So that will be April 8th at 1 p.m. So please join us in April. The link will take you to the our webinar page, and please register through our webpage for the next webinar. All right, thank you so much everyone for joining us. If you have any questions, we have a few more minutes. So feel free to type in the chat or unmute and ask.
Sorry, I do think I have a quick question on this front. So, would it be suggested to like have a mix, a different kind of media? I feel like most of the time we sort of gravitate towards the written form and looking at media and that, but would it be helpful or suggested to incorporate more visual aspects or auditory on that front?
I think that's a great idea. I think you're right that we do tend to gravitate to written sources. Even when we look at websites, we look at articles or websites. I think analyzing pictures or videos or even like a 1-minute TikTok, right, could be very interesting. See if you can apply that framework or those basic questions to it. I think especially the question about the emotion, like how does a picture or a video make us feel? What is my response to it? It would be really interesting to try that out. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Are there any specific kind of activities like you've noticed are pretty helpful with adult learners by any chance? Like any specific activities you've done that you feel are good?
Yeah. So what I heard is or works is like two things. I think looking at different sources on the same topic. So finding I'm just current affairs, right, or a news item, and then looking at what does for higher levels learners, you could look at what does the New York Times say, what does CNN say, what does Fox News say about the same topic, right? To kind of compare different angles is something that that can be useful. And then another thing is like that activity of role playing and assigning people arguments or opinions, positions can be very powerful as well. because it helps with empathy. And there's some websites where you can find like different viewpoints or different positions on certain topics, so you don't have to come up with everything on your own. Or even ask your students to come up with different positions, right? And with lower, like maybe with your beginner or intermediate learners, you could you can start with a safe topic, like, should we put pineapple on pizzas or not, right? And like try to like incorporate those skills into discussions like that.
Yeah, another thing I have done is that present the source that is fake or satirical, or like the Onion has like all fake hoax type things, and then go through the same questions and see debunking, like how this is not true. I think that you got to be careful with what to pick, but like Ilsa said, like light-hearted topics can be used to teach the skills, I think.
Mm.
And
Okay.
feel free to share ideas if you have. We have some time to open this up. I see some resources coming in the chat. Thank you, Carla. All right. Yeah, Carla, do you want to speak about the resources that you're sharing, or are you not able to?
Yeah, I just did this unit a couple of weeks ago. I did a ton of, research on different sources and things. And I found ISL Collective was a good start. And then I put in a couple of, Google Doc links as well. What I found with those is though I would change them to reflect more current things and maybe more appropriate for adult learners, because it was kind of like a little more for teenagers, but it's a good start. It's a good start, and it gives a good idea. So I was trying to find some other stuff that I did too. I just did it, and I just kind of pieced together a bunch of different things. But I like the links and docs and things that you guys shared with us, as well. So anyways, that's what I did. I kind of pieced it together. But I focused on lateral reading and whether you could tell something, just exactly what you're talking about, who's sending it. Tell me about the author. Oh, and then on one of these, it goes into websites like Snopes and different ones like that. Like you could put in stuff there. So that was helpful. And we did a bunch of practice. So it was a start. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I'm just trying to get as much info as I can about this because it's so important.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Hey, anyone else? All right. Well, if no more questions or comments or sharing, we can
Just
back.
one last one, sorry. I know that you shared before the link. I thought it was the link to register potentially for the April session, but I just got the feedback survey link. Is it possible to put the April registration link again, please?
Oh, thank you, Josie.
No, that's still the feedback link. Thank you.
Here's the link on the slide as well, but I think link in the chat is easier. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope to see you in April again via Zoom for the next webinar. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy your afternoon.